The air in the grand conclave of the Galactic Council was a solid thing, a monumental weight of silence and history pressed down upon the delegates by the cavernous, vaulted ceiling of obsidian flecked with captured starlight. Light, ancient and cold, bled from the swirling nebulae projected onto the dome above, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like ghosts across the tiered amphitheater. At the center of the chamber, a column of pale energy hummed, a nexus of communication and power that had bound the thousand sentient species of the Orion Arm for millennia. Today, it felt less like a beacon of unity and more like the heart of a tomb. High Executor Kalen of the Lorian Assembly stood at his podium, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the myriad lights of the conclave. His formal chitinous carapace, usually a lustrous shade of deep indigo, seemed dull and brittle under the strain. He felt the gaze of every being present, the hulking, predatory stillness of the Vexar Imperator across the chamber, the shimmering, anxious energy of the Signian emissaries, the cold, calculating silence of the automated delegates from the Silicon worlds. All of them were watching him. All of them were waiting. The silence stretched, thin and fragile, until it was finally broken by the Vexar Imperator, his voice a low growl that resonated through the very stone of the floor. The firewall in the Cygnus Vale has collapsed. The Aegis platforms are reporting a 97% failure rate. The swarm is through. We have deliberated for cycles, High Executor. We have debated, we have postponed, we have hoped. Hope has failed, logic remains. The time for hesitation has passed. Kalen did not look at him, keeping his gaze fixed on the swirling cosmos above. The Cygnus Vale. It had been their final, desperate gambit, a cordon of gravitational singularities and temporal stasis fields designed to halt the inexorable advance of the chittering void. The swarm, as it had been named by a terrified scout crew moments before their assimilation, was not an army. It did not conquer, it consumed. Worlds, stars, fleets, all were broken down into a gray, seething biomass that hungered for more. It was a plague of cosmic proportions, and it was now seeping into the core worlds, into the very heart of the Council's domain. The Vexar's words were sharp, each one a shard of ice in the oppressive quiet. For generations, the Vexar have maintained stewardship of the final dispensation, a protocol of last resort to be used only in the face of absolute existential annihilation. That moment is upon us. The protocol is named for its scale, for its finality. It is time, High Executor. It is time we deploy the galaxy. A tremor of disquiet passed through the conclave. The words themselves felt like a blasphemy. The Galaxy Protocol, a name spoken only in the most classified and terrifying of threat assessments. It was a theoretical weapon of such devastating scope that its very existence was a scar upon the Council's founding charter of peaceful coexistence. It was not a fleet of warships or a planet killer. It was a coordinated recalibration of the ancient stellar uplift engines that dotted the spiral arm, a network of precursor technology so old it predated most sentient life. Repurposed, they could create a wave of null entropy so vast it would scour entire sectors clean of matter and energy, creating a permanent, uncrossable void, a wound in the fabric of reality itself. It would stop the swarm. It would also erase thousands of star systems, countless worlds, and condemn any life within them to an oblivion so complete it would be as if they had never existed at all. Kalen felt a familiar, cold ache in his primary heart. This was the same logic, the same cold, brutal calculus that had led them to this point. His thoughts drifted back, a current of memory he could not fight, to a similar moment of crisis, to a similar impossible choice. He remembered the first reports of the swarm, emerging from the uncharted darkness of the Perseus Spur. He remembered the panic, the confusion, and the swift, terrible decision that followed. The swarm had appeared on the edge of a region of space occupied by a young, boisterous species. A species that had only recently joined the galactic community, full of strange potential and even stranger contradictions. They called themselves humanity. The Council in its fear had seen only one solution, a quarantine. They had collapsed the primary wormhole routes leading out of the Perseus Arm, isolating the entire sector. They had erected a smaller version of the Cygnus Vale, a wall of warped spacetime, and they had told the rest of the galaxy that the region was lost, consumed by the swarm. They had sacrificed humanity and all its worlds, Earth, its colonies, its fledgling starships, to buy time. Kalen had authorized it. He, the High Executor, the guardian of the Council's charter, had signed the death warrant for an entire sentient species. He had told himself it was a necessary evil, the only path to survival. He had watched the light from their sector of space flicker and die on the long-range charts, and he had buried the guilt under layers of duty and pragmatism. But the swarm had not been contained. The firewall had not held, and now the Vexar were proposing the same solution on an infinitely grander scale, to sacrifice a portion of the galaxy to save the rest. The ache in Kalen's heart intensified. It was the echo of a profound failure, a moral and strategic collapse that had begun with the betrayal of Earth. A shimmering delegate from the Cygnian hegemony pulsed with agitated light. Its voice was a series of melodic, chiming tones translated into galactic standard by the chamber's omnipresent field. Imperator, the use of the galaxy protocol is an act of cosmic desecration. It is an admission that we are no better than the void we fight. We would be destroying countless nascent life forms, erasing potential civilizations, sterilizing the very stardust from which future life might spring. There must be another way. The Vexar Imperator turned his massive head slowly, his reptilian eyes cold and unblinking. Another way? We have exhausted all other ways. Our fleets are being consumed. Our worlds are falling silent. Your cosmic desecration is a choice between a partial death and a total one. The Vexar choose survival. If you value the potential of future life so much, then you must be willing to make the sacrifices necessary to ensure there is a future at all. The chamber descended into a cacophony of hushed arguments, of frantic data streams exchanged between podiums. Kalen felt the pressure building, the weight of a decision that would define the fate of the galaxy. He had been wrong once. He had sacrificed the few to save the many, and it had only delayed the inevitable. Could he make the same choice again, knowing the cost? His mind was a storm of doubt and self-recrimination. The humans, he remembered their first contact. Their strange art, their chaotic data networks, their bizarre mix of brutal violence and profound compassion. They were illogical, emotional, unpredictable. The Council had deemed them too volatile, too young to be of any real consequence in galactic affairs. A minor species on a minor arm of the galaxy. Expendable. Suddenly, a new tone cut through the chamber's noise. It was not a voice, not a chime, but a pure, clean signal that overrode all other frequencies. A priority one alert, originating not from Council command, but from the Conclave's own orbital defense grid. On the central column of light, the swirling nebulae vanished, replaced by a stark, tactical display. It showed the system of Apex, the capital world of the Council, a sphere of swirling blue and white. And hanging in the void just beyond the orbit of its outermost moon was a single, impossible object. It was a ship, but it was like nothing any of them had ever seen. It was not the jagged, weaponized architecture of the Vexar, nor the organic, crystalline beauty of Cygnian vessels, nor the functional, blocky designs of the Lorian fleet. This ship was a perfect sliver of absolute black, a shape that seemed to drink the light of the nearby star. It was sleek, seamless, devoid of any visible ports, engines, or weapons. It was a wound in space, a sliver of pure void given form. It had not arrived through a wormhole. It had not dropped out of hyperspace. It had simply appeared, as if it had been there all along, waiting to be seen. The Vexar Imperator's voice boomed, shaking Kalen from his shock. What is this? Identify that vessel. Is it a scout for the swarm, a new form? The head of Council Security, a stoic grok with 4 massive arms, replied from his console, his voice strained with disbelief. Negative, Imperator. No biomass readings. No energy signature that matches the swarm. In fact, its energy signature is almost non-existent. It is running colder than the vacuum of space, and it is not responding to any of our hails. Tension coiled in the chamber, a palpable physical force. A single, unknown, impossibly advanced ship had just bypassed the most heavily defended system in the galaxy without any warning. It was either an act of supreme confidence or supreme madness. Kalen's mind raced. Who could possess such technology? The Silentium, the mythical core-dwellers, a race from another galaxy. Then the ship acted. It did not fire a weapon. It did not raise a shield. It sent a message, a single tight-beam transmission directed at the Conclave itself. The communication was not audio nor video. It was pure data, a packet of information so dense and elegantly structured it bypassed all security protocols as if they were not there. The chamber's central display flickered, and the tactical map was replaced by 2 symbols. First, a simple representation of a DNA helix. Then a perfect circle, shaded half in light, half in dark. The symbols held for a moment, then vanished, replaced by a string of text in flawless, unaccented galactic standard. We request permission to address the Council. The chamber was utterly silent. The simplicity of the request, contrasted with the terrifying power of its delivery, was unnerving. Kalen found his voice, the authority in it feeling thin and hollow even to his own auditory sensors. Who are you? Identify yourselves. The response was instantaneous. We are the representatives of the Terran conglomerate. We are humanity. The silence that followed was not one of tension. It was the silence of utter, profound shock. It was the silence of ghosts appearing at a feast. Humanity, the species they had abandoned. The civilization they had written off as dust and echoes consumed by the swarm in the sealed-off Perseus arm. Kalen felt his three hearts hammer against the inside of his carapace. It was impossible. No one could have survived. The quarantine was absolute. The swarm was relentless, yet the ship was there. And it was broadcasting a name that should have been nothing more than a footnote in a tragic history. The Vexar Imperator recovered first, his shock quickly hardening into suspicion and rage. Lies, a trick of the swarm, it has assimilated their knowledge, their language, and now it mocks us. Do not respond, destroy that vessel. But Kalen held up a hand, a gesture that commanded silence. He stared at the text on the display, his mind reeling. A trick, perhaps, but the swarm was a mindless plague. It did not communicate with such precision. It did not build ships of such impossible elegance. It did not request. It consumed. This was something else, something that defied everything they knew. Hold your fire, Kalen commanded, his voice firm, cutting through the Vexar's fury. He took a stabilizing breath, the filters in his throat clicking softly. Grant them a channel, let them speak. The central column of energy shimmered, solidifying into a holographic image. The being that appeared was not what any of them expected. There were no signs of assimilation, no grotesque amalgam of flesh and machine. It was a single human female standing in a space that was as minimalist and stark as the exterior of her ship. She was clad in a simple, dark uniform, her features calm and composed. Her face was pale, her eyes a deep, unreadable gray. There was no fear in them, no anger. No desperation. There was only a profound, unsettling stillness. She looked out at the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council, the beings who had condemned her entire species to death, and a deep, resonant silence emanated from her very presence. She did not seem like a victim pleading for aid. She seemed like an observer, a scholar who had arrived to witness a critical, long-foreseen event. I am Ambassador Eva Restover of the Terran conglomerate, she said, her voice perfectly modulated, carrying a weight that belied her slender form. I greet the members of the Galactic Council. The Vexar Imperator snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. Terran conglomerate, your worlds are ash, your people are a memory, you are a ghost, a puppet of the swarm sent to deceive us. Ambassador Restova's gaze shifted to the Imperator. There was no flicker of emotion in her eyes, only a quiet, analytical focus. Your records are incomplete, Imperator. We were not consumed. When you sealed the Perseus arm, you did not condemn us to death. You gave us solitude, you gave us focus. You gave us the one thing our civilization had always lacked, a singular, unifying purpose to understand our enemy. She paused, letting her words settle in the vast, silent chamber. Kalen felt a cold dread creep up his spine. What had they done? In their attempt to cauterize a wound, had they instead isolated a catalyst? Had they trapped this young, volatile species in a crucible with the single greatest threat the galaxy had ever known? What had emerged from that fire? For generations, while you built walls and fought a war of attrition, Rostova continued, her voice even and calm, we studied. The swarm is not an army, nor is it a mindless plague. You have misunderstood its fundamental nature. It is a signal, a corrupted, self-replicating biological algorithm, a scream echoing through spacetime from a long-dead civilization. It does not think, it does not strategize, it simply propagates. Its weakness is not a lack of firepower, but its own perfect, unyielding logic. A logic we have learned to read, a logic we have learned to predict. The Cygnian emissary shimmered brightly. You claim to understand the swarm. We have thrown the combined knowledge of 1,000 worlds at it and found nothing but chaos. You were looking for a mind, Rostova replied without hesitation. There is no mind to find. You were trying to defeat a foe. It is not a foe. It is a natural disaster, a storm of corrupted information given physical form. You do not fight a hurricane with weapons. You understand its patterns, you predict its path, and you move out of its way, or you find a way to dissipate its energy. The weight of her words settled upon the conclave. The sheer arrogance, the supreme confidence in her statement was breathtaking. A species left for dead, claiming to have solved the riddle that had baffled an entire galaxy. It was absurd. And yet, the ship, the impossible ship hanging in their space, a testament to a level of technology none of them possessed. Kalen finally found his voice, the words heavy with the guilt of his past decision. Ambassador, if what you say is true, why now? Why reveal yourselves at this moment? You could have remained in your isolation. You could have let the galaxy fall. For the first time, a flicker of something moved in Ambassador Rostova's eyes. It was not anger, not pity. It was something colder, more profound. Because your next action will not save the galaxy, it will doom it. We have been watching you, High Executor. We have been watching all of you. We have seen your fleets burn. We have seen your walls collapse. And we have listened to your deliberations today. We watched you prepare to deploy the galaxy. The Vexar Imperator let out a harsh, rasping laugh. You watched us. From a sealed-off arm of the galaxy? Your arrogance is boundless. Your pathetic species barely mastered faster-than-light travel before we locked you away. Rostova's gaze remained fixed on the Imperator, her calmness an unbreachable wall against his fury. Your understanding of physics is limited. You see the universe as a series of points connected by travel. We have learned to see it as it is, a single interconnected whole. We do not need to travel to see. We have learned to observe the universe through the quantum foam, through the subtle dance of entangled particles that ties every star and every planet together. Our observation is not instantaneous, but it is comprehensive. We do not have spies. We do not need them. We simply watch the fabric of reality itself. And we have watched you. We watched you betray us. We watched you fight your losing war. And now we are watching you consider an act of folly so monumental it will ensure the swarm's ultimate victory. A wave of disbelief and awe washed over the chamber, quantum observation on a galactic scale. It was a theoretical concept, a myth, something discussed by philosophers and quantum physicists in the same breath as gods and creation. To weaponize it, to turn it into a source of intelligence, it was beyond comprehension. They had been living in a glass house, their every move, every secret debate observed by the very people they had sacrificed. The humiliation was a palpable force. Kalen felt his limbs grow cold. What folly? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Galaxy Protocol is our last resort. It will create a buffer of empty space the swarm cannot cross. Ambassador Rostova's expression remained unchanged, but her voice carried a new, chilling gravity. That is what the Vexar believe it will do. That is what their flawed and incomplete translation of the precursor texts has led them to think. The ancient stellar uplift engines you intend to use are not weapons. They are resonance emitters. Their primary function was not to destroy matter, but to shape it on a celestial scale, to tune reality. The frequency you are preparing to broadcast, the one you believe will create a null entropy field, will do something very different. She paused, her gray eyes sweeping across the horrified faces in the conclave. The swarm, as I have said, is a corrupted signal. It propagates through a form of bioresonance. The frequency of the Galaxy Protocol is not a nullifying force. It is an attractant, a powerful galactic-scale beacon that resonates perfectly with the swarm's propagation code. You will not be creating a firewall, High Executor. You will be ringing a dinner bell. You will summon every last trace of the swarm from across the spiral arm and draw it directly here to the galactic core, to Apex, to this very chamber. You are not planning to deploy a weapon. You are planning a collective, civilizational suicide. The truth of her words hit the chamber with the force of a physical blow. It was so simple, so elegant in its horror, and so utterly believable. The Vexar, in their arrogance and desperation, had misinterpreted the ancient technology they guarded. They had mistaken a terraforming tool for a weapon of mass destruction. Their ultimate salvation was, in fact, their ultimate damnation. The Vexar Imperator stood frozen, his reptilian features a mask of disbelief turning slowly to pure, unadulterated fury. He opened his mouth to roar, to deny, to condemn this ghost from the past for her lies. But no sound came out. The logic was too cold, too precise. It fit perfectly with the swarm's inexplicable, relentless behavior. It explained why it sometimes changed direction without reason, as if drawn by some unseen current. They had been fighting a tide, and they were about to trigger a tsunami. The chamber erupted, not in debate this time, but in pure, unadulterated panic. Delegates shouted, their voices a rising tide of fear and accusation. The Vexar Imperator was surrounded by his own advisors, his confident posture crumbling as the full weight of humanity's revelation crashed down upon him. He had been about to lead the galaxy into an extinction event of his own making. The irony was a poison too bitter to swallow. Kalen watched the chaos, his own mind a silent, numb void. The betrayal of Earth was not just a moral stain. It had been a strategic blunder of galactic proportions. They had cast out the one people who might have understood the true nature of the enemy. They had thrown the key away and sealed the lock from the outside. Amid the rising tide of hysteria, Ambassador Rostova's voice cut through the noise, still calm, still perfectly controlled. There is another way. A way to end this, not by destroying a part of the galaxy, but by healing it. All motion, all sound ceased. Every being in the conclave turned their attention back to the serene, holographic figure. Hope, a feeling that had been absent for so long, flickered weakly in the oppressive atmosphere. Healing. How does one heal a force that consumes stars? As I stated, Rostova continued, her tone shifting from that of an observer to that of a physician explaining a diagnosis. The swarm is a corrupted signal, a scream, and a scream can be soothed. We have not spent our generations in isolation merely observing. We have been working. We have developed a counter-resonance, a complex, multi-layered waveform that we call the requiem. It will not destroy the swarm's biomass. It will sever its connection to the hive signal. It will break the feedback loop of its propagation algorithm. It will, in essence, put the storm to sleep. The Cygnian emissary pulsed with a soft, cautious light. A song? You mean to sing the swarm into silence? A simplistic metaphor, but not an inaccurate one, Rostova conceded. The requiem waveform must be broadcast with immense power and precision. It must saturate every infected system simultaneously to prevent the algorithm from re-establishing itself. There is only one system in the galaxy with a broadcast array powerful enough and centralized enough to accomplish this. Your own deep space communications network, centered here on Apex. We do not have the power to broadcast the requiem on the necessary scale from our ship alone. We need your help. We need you to grant us access to the Conclave's central command spire. The audacity of the request was staggering. She was asking for the keys to the kingdom. The command spire was the neural center of the entire Galactic Council, the hub through which all military, political, and economic information flowed. To grant an outside power, a power they had grievously wronged, access to it was unthinkable. It was a security risk of the highest possible order. The Vexar Imperator, finally regaining his voice, slammed a clawed fist onto his podium. The sound cracked through the chamber like a thunderclap. Never, you are spies, tricksters. This is a ploy to seize control of the Council. You would have us lower our defenses and hand you the throat of our civilization. I say again, destroy that ship, and proceed with the deployment of the galaxy. Her words are poison, designed to make us hesitate until it is too late. Kalen looked from the raging Imperator to the impossibly calm Ambassador. He saw two futures laid bare before him. One was a path of fire and oblivion, a desperate gamble based on flawed knowledge and born of pride and fear. It was the same path that had led him to sacrifice Earth, and it had led them all to this precipice. The other path was one of trust, trust in a species he had wronged, trust in a science he did not understand. It was a path that required humility, an admission of his own catastrophic failure. It was a path that might lead to salvation or to a different, more subtle kind of destruction. He felt the weight of 1,000 worlds on his shoulders. He was the high executor, the final authority. The choice was his. He remembered the calm, analytical eyes of the human ambassador. There was no deceit in them. There was no malice. There was only a cold, hard clarity. They had not come here for revenge. If they had, they would not have warned them about the Galaxy Protocol. They would have simply watched the Council obliterate itself. They had come for something else. They had come to solve the problem. Slowly, deliberately, Kalen raised his head, his multifaceted eyes meeting Rostova's holographic gaze. He saw his own reflection in their gray depths, a being of power, authority, and profound, soul-crushing regret. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. Imperator, Kalen said, his voice resonating with a renewed, solemn authority that silenced the Vexar's tirade. You will stand down. Your recommendation to deploy the Galaxy Protocol is denied. Your counsel on this matter is no longer required. He turned his attention to the head of Council Security. Commander Grok, you will power down all offensive systems on the orbital defense grid. Lower the planetary shields. Open a direct, unimpeded channel from the human vessel to the central command spire. Grant them full, unrestricted access. A wave of gasps and horrified murmurs swept the chamber. The Vexar Imperator looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his jaw hanging open in stunned disbelief. High Executor, this is treason. You are surrendering our capital, our entire civilization, to a ghost. No, Kalen replied, his voice as cold and hard as the void between stars. I am atoning for a sin of fear, a sin of arrogance. We committed that sin when we abandoned humanity to the dark. We will not compound it by embracing a final, ignorant oblivion. We have trusted our own flawed wisdom for too long, and it has led us to the brink. Today, we will try something new. We will trust those who have seen the truth we were too blind to perceive. He looked back at Rostova, a silent apology passing between them, an acknowledgement of a debt that could never truly be repaid. Ambassador Rostova, the command spire is yours. Rostova gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. We are grateful for your trust, High Executor. We will not betray it. The broadcast will begin momentarily. Her image flickered and vanished, replaced once more by the tactical display. On it, they all watched as a thin, brilliant beam of light lanced out from the black human ship, striking the towering spire that rose from the center of Apex's capital city. A moment later, the spire itself began to glow, a soft, ethereal blue light that pulsed in a slow, rhythmic cadence. The chamber was silent, every delegate holding their breath, their gazes fixed on the display. Out in the void, where the swarm's advance fleets were tearing through the last of the Council's picket ships, a change began. The data feeds from the front lines were the first to show it. The chaotic, frenzied energy signatures of the swarm vessels began to stabilize. The angry crimson bioluminescence that pulsed across their organic hulls softened, shifting through shades of orange, then yellow, then a serene, calming green, and finally, a deep, tranquil blue mirroring the light from the spire. Their relentless forward momentum slowed, then ceased altogether. The chittering, psychic static that had plagued the communications of every council ship vanished, replaced by a profound and unnerving silence. The swarm ships, from the smallest fighter-sized organisms to the moon-sized bio-dreadnoughts, simply stopped. They floated inert and dormant, their weapons retracting, their drive fields dissipating. They were no longer an all-consuming tide of death. They were just ships, adrift in the silent dark. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 different fronts, the same scene was playing out. The great storm had been becalmed, the scream had been silenced, the requiem had worked. A collective sigh of relief so deep and profound it was almost a sob echoed through the grand conclave. The war, the endless, hopeless war, was over. They had not won. They had not lost. The conflict had simply ceased to be. Kalen stood at his podium, his body trembling with the release of generations of tension. He looked at the Vexar Imperator, who had slumped into his seat, his proud, predatory features now just looking old and defeated. He looked at the shimmering Signian, now glowing with a brilliant, joyful light. He felt the weight of his past mistake, the betrayal of Earth, but for the first time it was not just a source of guilt. It was the beginning of a story. A story of failure, and of a strange, unexpected redemption. Later, after the initial wave of celebration and disbelief had subsided, Kalen found himself in his private chambers, looking out of a vast window at the star-dusted sky. The black human ship still hung in orbit, a silent sentinel. A soft chime announced a visitor. He granted it entry. The holographic form of Ambassador Rostova appeared in the center of the room. She was alone. "The Requiem is stable," she said, her voice as calm as ever. "The swarm network is permanently severed. The individual organisms will eventually exhaust their energy reserves and become inert husks. The threat is over." "On behalf of the Galactic Council," Kalen began, the formal words feeling utterly inadequate, "I offer the deepest, most profound gratitude of all our peoples. And I offer my own apology for the decision to seal the Perseus arm, for our fear, for our failure." Rostova's expression did not change, but Kalen sensed a shift in her stillness, a subtle crack in her perfect composure. "Apology is a human concept, High Executor, we understand it, but we do not require it. Your actions, though born of fear, were the catalyst for our transformation. In your attempt to save yourselves, you forced us to save ourselves, and in doing so we found something you need to understand." Kalen frowned, something more than the nature of the swarm. "Far more," she replied, her gray eyes seeming to look through him, out into the great void beyond the window. "When you sealed the arm, you created an artificial border, but space is not empty. We were not alone in our isolation. There were artifacts, relics of civilizations that rose and fell long before the first of our species stood upright." She brought up a holographic image between them. It was a structure so vast it dwarfed reason. A ring of black, crystalline material, impossibly thin, orbiting a supermassive black hole. Its surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe, hinting at a purpose beyond comprehension. "We found this on the edge of the galactic halo in the Uit cloud of a long-dead star," Rostova explained. "It is not a weapon, it is not a city, it is a listening post, and it has been broadcasting a single, repeating message for over 1 billion years." A message, Kalen asked, his voice hushed with awe. From whom? We do not know, we call them the precursors, but we have deciphered the message. It is not a greeting, it is not a memorial, it is a warning. Rostova's gaze met Kalen's, and for the first time he saw a genuine, deep-seated emotion in her eyes. It was not fear. It was a cold, clear-eyed gravity, the solemnity of a sentinel who has stood watch for 1,000 years. The swarm, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, was not an invading force from another galaxy. It was a defense mechanism, a failed one. It was a form of self-replicating, scorched earth protocol created by the precursors to combat an enemy. The swarm's purpose was to create a buffer of dead space, just as you intended to do with the Galaxy protocol, but on a far grander scale. It was designed to consume their own galaxy to starve an opponent that fed on life itself. But they lost control of it. The swarm's algorithm became corrupted, and it consumed its creators along with their enemies. Kalen struggled to process the information. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was a malfunctioning shield. An enemy? What enemy could be so terrible that a species would be willing to sacrifice their entire galaxy to stop it? The holographic image of the listening post was replaced by a simulation. It was a complex, beautiful tapestry of light, representing the fabric of spacetime. Then, from the edge of the simulation, something appeared. It was not a ship or a creature. It was an absence, a thread being pulled from the tapestry, a slow, methodical unraveling of reality itself. The precursor's message calls them the Weavers, Rostova said, her voice soft but filled with an ancient dread. They are not from our universe. They are an extra-dimensional intelligence that perceives our reality as a substrate, a raw material to be harvested. They do not conquer, they do not consume, they simply unmake. They erase existence not to feed but to create something else in their own dimension. The swarm was a desperate attempt to create a reality so toxic, so devoid of complex information, that the Weavers would find it useless. It failed. And the warning from the listening post is clear. The Weavers are still out there, in the great empty void between the galaxies, and they are coming. Kalen stared at the simulation, at the slow, inexorable unraveling of space and time. The swarm had been a physical threat, a monster that could be seen and, as humanity had proven, understood. But this was a threat to the very concept of existence. It was not a war to be fought, but a law of physics to be defied. He looked at Ambassador Rostova, and finally he understood. He understood the black ship, the quantum observation, the calm, detached demeanor. Humanity had not just survived the swarm. They had graduated from it. They had been forced to evolve, to think on a scale that the rest of the Council had never imagined. The betrayal had not destroyed them. It had elevated them. It had prepared them. Our quantum observation network was reverse-engineered from the precursor's listening post, Rostova stated, confirming his thoughts. It is how we see them coming. Their progress is slow, but it is constant. They are crossing the intergalactic void. They will be here, not in our lifetimes, perhaps not for thousands of years, but they will arrive, and the galaxy must be ready. Kalen looked out the window again at the familiar stars of his home. They no longer looked like beacons of civilization and hope. They looked like fragile, flickering candles in an infinite, encroaching darkness. The war with the swarm was over. The real war, the war for existence itself, had just been declared, and the galaxy's only true guardians were the very people it had cast aside. The Galactic Council had betrayed Earth. And in doing so, they had unwittingly forged the very weapon, the very shield, the very hope they would need for the true twilight struggle to come. Humanity had been forced to watch the galaxy, and in doing so, they had seen the abyss staring back. And they had not flinched. They had prepared, and now, at long last, they had returned to teach the others how to see.